Uh, we're going to be talking about CalFlex Hub, the California Load Flexibility Research and Deployment Hub. And I also want to thank the California Energy Commission for sponsoring this work. I'm not sure if Matt and Kadir are in the room yet. I don't think so. I think they're probably still at the gate too. So they'll be here shortly, I'm sure. Andrew McAllister, you'll be hearing from him, and thank you for the support for this work. I'll go through just a few opening remarks about what CalFlex Hub is, and we're going to spend the day talking about how we can help load flexibility address some of the challenges with renewable integration and our changing electric grid. Go ahead to the next slide, please. I want to start with a little bit of a history. How many of you have seen Oppenheimer? Let's say about a third. Oppenheimer, you saw that there were pictures from the physics labs at UC Berkeley. One of the reasons that LBL was founded was not the Manhattan Project, but it was the physics of particles and the understanding of the fundamental nature of matter. And here's a picture of one of the magnets from the particle accelerators. Ernest Lawrence invented the particle accelerator. And that's him in the bottom with his hands folded. You may remember the picture. And then up at the top, the guy with the pipe is Oppenheimer. Ernest Lawrence was the first US-born celebrity scientist. He was on the cover of Time magazine, and people asked him about cooking recipes and all kinds of things. I mean, people cared about science, but they cared about him as a personality. And he was a remarkable communicator about science. And you saw that in the movie, for those of you who saw that. Oppenheimer was a theorist, and Lawrence was an experimentalist, and we need both. We have both in the room today. People doing modeling, people doing things in the field, and that's what we need to make things go forward. Enrico Fermi was part of his team, and we have a scientist named Art Rosenfeld, who was one of Enrico Fermi's students, who started the Building Energy Efficiency Program here after the oil embargo. So we have this physics tradition, but after the oil embargo, we started a strong program in energy efficiency, thinking about the environment and the grid and what we could do for the American consumer. Go ahead to the next slide. This is a quick overview of the energy technologies area that I oversee at LBL. We work on demand side technology, so buildings, industry, transportation, but we also work on supply side, on renewables, on energy storage. And we look forward to talking with you all today about buildings and the grid, but also EVs and what we're seeing for California in being leaders in renewable integration and decarbonization. Go ahead to the next slide. I'm going to make a couple of comments of what CalFlex Hub is trying to do. On the left, there are some pictures of the duck curve in 2025. 2050 kind of wrapped around there. So we are changing our consumption when we electrify. We're adding more electricity use for cooling and heat pumps. A lot of those heat pumps for gas have been gas for heating, but we're electrifying space heating, we're electrifying water heating, we're electrifying transportation. So as we add more renewables on the grid and add these new loads, we're seeing a lot of challenges in the way we operate the grid. California has set a 7 gigawatt load shift goal. About half of that is here today in automated demand, manual demand response. We'll talk about that in a moment. But CalFlex Hub is trying to support the idea of price response to incentivize another 3 gigawatts of load shifting. And those are the top 100 peak demand hours, but we also care about those valley demand hours. So we're trying to fill up that belly of the duck, which is getting deeper out into the future. So we want to move load from the dirtier times of the day and the more expensive times of the day to the cleaner times of the day. So that's a piece of what CalFlex Hub is trying to do. Go ahead to the next slide. Here's a list of some of the key kinds of research that we're doing. We're trying to understand the technologies. We want to know what type of technologies can respond to prices. Those are things like space heating and water heating, pool pumps. I'll go through a list of our projects for you in a few minutes, but we are trying to use the state's MIDAS portal, the Market Informed Demand Automation Server. MIDAS is a common protocol, a database of dynamic tariffs. And the vision is that you go to that portal and you communicate with your devices through third parties that are automation service providers. We're looking at what kind of communication models are being used for that. We recently developed something called OpenADR 3.0, which is a version of the OpenADR technology that the CEC's invested in for now 20 years, but evolving that to be consistent with the MIDAS protocol. We're working on the control methods. Where is the control? What kind of controls are needed? And we'll talk a lot about that today. We'll be talking about business models and the value to the grid. What's the value on the utility bill? And what's the value to the grid in terms of addressing that ramping problem, addressing overgeneration. So we have a lot of hours per year where we actually don't use all the electricity that we're generating with the renewables. And then we're very interested in usability and the human dimensions of this. What is the experience of people in the pilots that we're running in the field? I'll talk about those in a moment. And how do we ensure equity? A lot of people are concerned about comfort and thermostats, but a lot of these disadvantaged communities don't have comfort in their homes today. So we're even getting them to the point where they're healthy and safe in their homes. A lot of them are renters. And so how do we think about this technology? So some of those are some of the things that the team's working on and thinking about the research agenda for CalFlexHub and how to help advance these technologies. Let's go ahead to the next slide. This is a map showing you the kinds of things we're doing in CalFlexHub. In the green on the right are the technologies that involve residential. There was a big emphasis on mass market technologies. So you'll see we're working on smart panels in homes to minimize the need for upgrading the electric service. We're looking at pool pumps consistent with the FDAS, the flexible demand appliances that CEC's putting out, EV charging and smart thermostats, heat pump water heaters in both single family and multifamily, integrated heat pumps that have thermal storage. Some of them have heating and cooling and water heating all in one system. Some of them have heating and water heating in one system. So we're looking at how can we package these heat pumps into integrated systems. We're looking at ceiling fans and thermostats, HVAC in small commercial, predictive control in large commercial. And then we have several campus projects down at UC San Diego, UC Merced, and UC Davis, interacting with a variety of loads. So we have about 19 projects in 30 different buildings or locations. So a campus is a location and a home is a location. So some of these are multi-building sites and some of these are individual homes. Go ahead to the next slide. One of the key challenges for us is how does the device receive a signal? And there's basically 4 ways. It can receive it through an OEM, an original equipment manufacturer, a heat pump water heater, an EV. So it can get it straight from the OEM, or you can get it through a third party. The third party may have an agreement with the OEMs, and the third party may have interaction with a gateway, which I'll describe in a moment, OEM, or through some sort of community server. And it could potentially go through a local controller without a cloud. So this is a battle of the clouds. I call it a thunderstorm. So there's a lot of clouds that we're interacting with, and understanding the business models behind those clouds is a big challenge for this type of technology. And the very bottom one is a building central gateway. We have those in commercial buildings with tritium boxes and Niagara framework, but in homes, there is something called Matter, where Amazon, Google, and Apple are working on interoperability of home automation. So there is a lot of happening in this space. There's a lot of cybersecurity and AI, and we'll talk a little about some of those things today. But we want to know the pros and cons of these things, and how does the customer experience this? Who do they trust when they think about who to involve in automating their devices? And how do we think about these different business models, utilities, OEMs, and third parties? Go ahead to the next slide. So this is my final slide, and these are some of the lessons and key questions that we see so far. We're about not quite halfway through the CalFlexHub program. So I want to raise your hand if those of you who are actually part of the CalFlexHub research program. You see about half the people in the room are, and this is the first time we've actually met in person. So we did all of this over Zoom over the last few years, and it's really a celebration for us to be here together because this is a hot topic. And we look forward to getting you all involved in today's activities. We're very interested in how ready are technologies to receive dynamic pricing. And we know that most technologies are not ready. Most demand response is manual. Some is automated, but how do you allow the device to receive a continuous price signal, 8760? So what does that mean for the control systems? And there's limited understanding of it, but growing. The second one is usability and customer value. We are concerned that is the price response on the tariff going to motivate adoption of these technologies? We need a value stack like we do with batteries. So we want prices and we want maybe emergency DR on top of that, because that's going to provide the most value. What are the business models to get the most value out of those DERs, which is my next one about, can automated price response coexist with event-based DR, and how to value the shift? Because again, we know those top 100 resource adequacy model hours, but then there's the distribution system. I was just talking with Albert Chu from PG&E. There could be prices at the CAISO market, but there could be a distribution constraint locally. And how do we value that? So that's one of the challenges in price formation. Automation and integration in AI is super exciting. A lot of people say, oh, if the devices could just listen to an AI device, we'll have our problem solved. But we know interoperability with the devices is a big deal. And people aren't sure who to trust to enable their device to be continuously listening to some sort of third-party signal. And what does that mean for their bill and for contracts? What are the ongoing contracts for these virtual power plants? And then finally, some device APIs are more open, so third parties can work with the automation, and others control the customer's experience. And there's pros and cons to the different types of APIs. So we're seeing even among smart thermostats, there's different kinds of APIs. And can we understand those? And when a customer buys them, do they want one that's more open, or do they want one that's got a very limited set of attributes? So those are some of the things we're looking at. And now I have the great pleasure of introducing Andrew McAllister, who's going to give you an overview of some of the things happening at the California Energy Commission. So Andrew is a commissioner serving his third term at the CEC, and he leads the policy area of